Welcome to biology. I'm going to be teaching the first half of the course, and my name is Anil Kapoor. To give you an introduction to biology, we're basically going to talk about the circle of life and what life really contains and what things life all has in common. But before we even do that, we kind of have to get an understanding of what are the basic units of life and what really makes us go. If we look at any science, we really start from the basics and we sort of work our way up. And it makes a lot of sense. If we look at our class and how it's designed, we're going to have a little bit of chemistry that we're going to have to go over because the body is really just a container where we have a lot of different chemical reactions occur, and those chemical reactions dictate how we react. So we're going to start out at the atomic level and how oxygen works and how when we break bonds together, energy starts to come about. And we'll talk about that later. Once we get that understanding, we can move on and start talking about DNA and what DNA contains and how this molecule that we basically we still don't have the ability to see small pieces of it. It has the ability to give us instructions for everything that we do, from chemicals that we need to produce to wake up to chemicals that we produce to fall asleep. Hormones, everything comes from our genetic material. We're accessing it 24/7. If we keep going, we're going to look at these things called organelles. Now, you've probably heard the word organ before. An organ means something like liver or kidney or pancreas. These are small areas of your body that do a specific task. Organelle is the smaller containers inside your cell that do a specific task as well. My example was mitochondria. So every cell has a couple mitochondria in it, and a mitochondria is basically how the cell makes energy. You've probably heard in the past powerhouse of the cell, but our cell has a whole bunch of little specific pieces that do something. So there's some areas where we can take waste, and then there's some areas that we store, like our nucleus. We store our genetic material in, and everything has its sort of specific role. So not just do we have large organs like livers and kidneys, but if we look at each of those cells have little specific areas that do specific work as well. If we move up, we're in a cell. And a cell is a specific thing that does a task. So the example I'm giving here is a nervous cell. So a neuron. And a neuron cell, its job is to move information from point A to point B. So it uses chemical and electricity to get you to start to think or learn or whatever you need to do. If we take a bunch of those specific tissues or cells and put them together, that's called a tissue. So for instance, if we keep going with the nervous system, your brain is a tissue that's in the nervous system, and that would be the organ where you can store information and makes you work. If we look at an organ system, that's going to be your brain, your spinal cord, all the way down to nerves that'll help you respond to the environment. You put all those organs together, and we've got you. And we're basically going to kind of stop somewhere around tissue or cell in this class. If you do organs and organ systems and that's going to be more anatomy and phys number 1 and 2. If you keep going and take a class called 181, you'll continue on and learn about populations. So for instance, if we look at an organism like you're one person. But if we look at a population, let's say a population of students at Phoenix College. So all the students at Phoenix College would be like a population. If we look at the community at Phoenix College, we could break it down to teachers and students and staff and security, but we can even look at the larger population at Phoenix College and look at the squirrels and the ants and the birds and all the living creatures that live on that campus or on that campus at one time. And that would be called a community. An ecosystem would be something like, let's say, we see in Phoenix, or better yet, SoCal. That's always a nice place to think about, where you'd have an environment and you'd have different populations or communities coming together. And then if you take all the ecosystems and put them together, that's going to be the biosphere, or the Earth, and how all these systems are sort of interconnected. It's hard to think about how the deserts are connected to the rainforest, but there are interwebs that sort of connect them all, and if one little area collapses, the other one does too. And that brings me to the environmental interactions. These are organisms that interact both with living and non-living parts. And when I think about these two parts of the ecosystem, I think about basically chemical cycling. If you think about it, this one's kind of cool. It's so cool that it's hard for me to even wrap my head around because it's so amazing. So you go ahead and this is just one example of many. You breathe out CO2. You know that you breathe in oxygen and you breathe out CO2. That CO2 will get picked up by a plant, and that plant, along with sunlight, will turn it into energy. So it'll turn it into its form of glucose, energy. And it's going to use some of it to grow, and it's going to store a bunch of it. So now let's say you go ahead and eat that plant. You're going to take that sugar that's in the plant. You don't think about plants being sweet, but that's how we store energy in these things called glucose. We store them as this energy, and we eat it, and that's mostly carbon, and that carbon came from our breath, animals' breath, the environment. And now what we're going to do is break it down in our body into small sugars to basically energize us. When we're done, we're going to breathe that CO2, that carbon out, and now that carbon is going to get picked up by a plant and made into sugar, and the whole system's going to get started again and again and again. So that's chemical cycling. Energy flow would be how we can sort of think about how energy moves around in our ecosystem or environment. So for instance, sunlight is the source of all energy. That sunlight makes it so plants can grow. We go ahead and eat those plants and we get energy from them. We get glucose and sugars and things like that. And that's how energy is sort of flowing in the environment.